Welcome back, everybody, for some more Heroes of the Storm Korea action. We are here for HGC. My name is Wolf. With me, as always, is G-Clef. Not always. Sometimes we rally up here, too. We have a little bit of rotation going on. But it's day number 2, and we have some good matches today. We talked about how the first one, BlossoM versus Raven, should be closer than what we saw from Mighty versus Tempest last night.
Yep, it was still a 3-1. Mighty had a pretty good victory, but the real question, where does Garrosh stand in the meta right now? We saw a lot of Garrosh throughout Korea and also a lot in NA, a little bit less in EU, but still it feels like Garrosh is one of the top tanks right now, and I feel like it's going to continue over this weekend at least.
Yeah, and I think experimentation will continue as well in terms of top-tier teams playing against teams that are towards the bottom end of points, as we saw yesterday. The high prioritization coming in from L5 against RRR. RRR has another tough opponent tonight in MVP Black. That will be our second series of the evening. That one could be a tough one. They're going to have to try to keep morale high. But our first series, we'll see with BlossoM's new roster changes if they will be able to perform, as they did have a pretty good run towards the end of our regular season for Part 1 for the Eastern Clash. As always, here's our overview. If you haven't seen it yet, you're watching Heroes for the first time, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy Heroes of the Storm. It's pretty good esport.
The overview. And
Yep.
it's a fun game for sure. And you know what's really fun?
What's fun? Tell me.
The Chromie Brawl. It's so fun.
I haven't played it yet.
It's short and I love it. I gotta say, I love the Pool Party a little bit more, but it's similar. I'm loving it.
What's your favorite brawl?
Pool Party, for sure.
My favorite is the Nova one, because I literally won a tournament. I won on stage in China
You
with
said
Nova.
Nova on official stream.
Yeah,
you
the
can't
Nova
do
one.
that,
Because
Wolf.
I won against the Chinese commentators. I had the best kill-death ratio in that game on stage in China. And so that one is very special to me, to be honest with you.
Nova in HGC. It's banned. No.
Well, with Raven playing today, we don't know, G-Clef,
Yes,
but we'll see.
We are not sure. We saw lots of Asmodeans. We saw lots of different things. 0-2 Nova was the one that I remember specifically from Season 1. But here's the standings for NA and EU.
Yeah, you know, pretty much the same. Nothing has really changed drastically in just one day of playtime. We'll take a closer look at these as we go forward. Remember, the Space Station and Lag Force, of course, replacing teams. Lag F, I suppose, is the joke. We were talking about that yesterday for Naventic, but you know, sad for me to see Naventic go. They've always been my favorite North American roster. I feel like represented North America more than any other team consistently in international events, but their time has passed, and here is our standing for HGC Korea. We will see if Black will actually take the 8-0 perfect score today. It seems likely, given the play we've seen from RRR so far. But the big story was yesterday, Tempest and Mighty obviously facing off against each other, and Tempest taking the dominant win.
Yeah, they did take a dominant win with a 3-1 victory. I feel like it could have actually been 3-0. They had some mistakes in the later part of the game, and we met them right after the game, and they were pretty happy with the result. Of course, there were some mistakes, but they were overall pretty happy with yesterday's game to start off Part 2. And today we have we're starting off with BlossoM versus Raven. They are BlossoM in 5th and Raven, of course, at the bottom. BlossoM, they have been climbing a lot, especially not just from the role changes. I feel like they are finding their color for the first time.
I think so, and I also think that when BlossoM has Wiz on the top lane, which is the case in their current roster, I think that's always where they found the most success. Back when they were, you know, of course, Supreme Mixtape very briefly there, I feel like that's where we saw the really good Wiz shot calling, and that team came into the beginning of HGC Korea looking strong. We saw them have a good performance against MVP Miracle back then. They fell off for a while, and they just basically played better than Raven. That was the only series they were able to take in Phase 1 before we went to Sweden for Mid-Season Brawl, was the series against Raven. Now RRR has also been able to accomplish that feat. Haven't taken a set yet, unfortunately, in Part 2 of Phase 2. But yeah, I think that finding the color for BlossoM, I think, is a good way to put it. They're kind of finding out who they are and where their roles were supposed to be. And No Chat on the support, I think, has so far been pretty good. As Rhaegar, I think, is the one that stands out the most.
I talked to No Chat, and he said he's not having as much fun as before, but surely he thinks he found the right role. He found the right talent where he belongs in the team. And of course, Wiz used to be the support, and he was before he was a Millie, but he's back on Millie. I was commentating in Korean with him on the Korean desk for Eastern Clash. I asked him lots of questions, and he just decided that he belongs in the Millie zone. He will never change again.
All right, look at all these famous people. We got Clagnix, J-Hal, Malfurion is very famous, Anna Prosser. Oh, no, this is about the cheers. So if you guys want to drop the bits, as was suggested by L5's Hooligan, then this is where you need to drop them. You want to go to the cheer just below the Twitch screen. So
That's
I know
right.
you're all full screen right now, but go ahead and minimize that and scroll down. You see the cheer button there. Korea's sole representative, MVP Black, 7th of 8 up here. And, you know, if you want to represent any of the teams playing in this league, be sure to do so, as Gladman7 is by far the most cheered, and Tuki2 in second place there. We got a Korean rep, at least in terms of the individual leaderboard for donations. So Korea, the best in many esports, but soon to be the best at donating too. He's like he's rising up real quick. Okay.
Just the personal one, and I think MVP Black, I think they will climb up a little bit higher, and with L5 winning the Eastern Clash, they will be climbing up slowly. You can continue cheering for the Korean teams especially, but as we talked about before, here is BlossoM from left, no chat. He's been having some changes, and it fits in support role a lot better from what we see too.
Yeah.
And himself agreeing with that, I think it's a very good sign to start off.
Remember, Mora was once Modern Life. That's the player that you see on screen now. I'm always the biggest hater of roster swaps. Position swaps. And in this case, though, based on the results we've seen so far and how young these players are in terms of their Heroes of the Storm history, it makes sense. The oldest player in terms of Heroes play out of all these 5 you might think is Wiz, but you'd be wrong because it's Dudu. He's the one who's played the longest, and he is not role swapping. He's still going to be playing main ranged assassin, so feels like everyone's kind of swapped around him to better empower him because we're in this hyper carry meta still. I think we will move into a mage meta coming up with the patch next week, but Wiz has gone back to the shot calling role. He's going to be in the solo lane, in the top lane very often, and as you can see, King's point is he did cast in the Eastern Clash. You got to talk to him, cast with him a little bit, so you got to hear his thoughts. But I think the role swaps you saw for BlossoM have worked out for them, and I think they're taking the game very seriously despite being so down in the rankings, having such a rough time all season long, all 2017. They are just changing from week to week, improving. Gondar on the roster hasn't really delivered on expectations people had for him, but still, the roster looks solid with these position swaps, and I have high hopes for them. They are by far the favorites in this best of 5.
I think this part 2 is the biggest challenge for Gondar, especially, of course, his favorite since the beginning of his own Heroes of the Storm experience was Stitches. And right when he came into HGC, Stitches was in the meta, top picked all the time, so he filled in perfectly for the team. But now, starting what we saw from yesterday, Stitches not really on top anymore, so especially in part 2 when a lot of the changes, and will be more changes coming out in next weekend. So starting from there, where is he going to stand? What other heroes can he play just like Stitches, the game-changing moves? Can he still do that with the other heroes?
Yeah,
that will be the biggest question coming up.
Especially with heroes like ETC being so out of the favor as well. He showed a great ETC as a Nubrock as well. Nubrock not as popular, so those are the issues. Now let's talk about Raven for a little bit. They found themselves at the bottom of part 1 after our first round robin for regular season for season 2 here of 2017. And unfortunately for Raven, they dropped even additionally a map to RRR. Normally they were able to defeat RRR, at least look good against them. That's what happened in promotions. But in this season now, they've also dropped a map to RRR. They brought Darvish into the roster for Season 2. Of course, Chom is still Joju, so not a roster swap there, but everything else is the majority the same here. But in terms of drafting and overall rotational play, mechanical skill, it feels like the question is, has Raven lost their way? Because this is a group of professionals, especially NMX, Hamlin, and Darvish have so much professional experience. Diyoung was considered one of the best tanks back in late 2015. Unfortunately, this roster, if you looked at it in 2015, you might say, you might have looked at this roster in 2015 and said, well, this looks like it could be a super team. But 2 years later, not the case. And they have, I mean, honestly, realistically, can anyone predict them to take a map even against BlossoM here? I don't think so. Look at that KDA, and as you say, ouch. on the win rates here.
See lots of zeros, and even the 2 in the front, I don't think that's a good sign for sure. And as King's mentioning, someone needs to cure this team, and I think Darvish needs to cure his team, but from what we see, he's having a lot of fun. I talked to Young, and there are lots of problems in this team. He's trying to carry the team, but for now, it's not so perfect. And maybe later on, they can carry a little bit more and try to find themselves into a better position in this league.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big takeaway for Raven is going to be what we see from them tonight and what we see from them 5 weeks from now before playoffs is what has changed. And I think if nothing has changed, this team may not sit in these chairs next season for the 2018 Part 1 in HGC. They might find themselves in the Open Division.
That's right. The Open Division, I've been watching every single one, and they're pretty good. There are new teams, there are pretty good teams, and they may actually find themselves in the Open Division next season. But here we go, Battlegrounds. Dragonshire banned from Raven. That's a little rare one. Of course, their rotation is not the best one, so I'd say remove that one. And BlossoM just went ahead and banned Warhead Junction. Map 1. Game 1 will be Battlefield of Eternity once more, just like yesterday.
I actually like the Dragonshire ban, especially with Wiz now in the top lane again. I think that it's one of BlossoM's better maps, so a smart targeted ban here by Raven. BOE will be their map choice as well, so they're willing to give up first ban in order to take this draft to this map. A risky choice, obviously, on this map. To pick it first, you have to be very confident because you are giving control of the draft to your opponents, but it'll be a first ban Uther here.
Perfect Uther is a little bit of a change. It's coming out from BlossoM. Of course, Chom was playing a pretty good Uther every other time, and most of the time, Raven won a game during the set was when they had Uther. So I think that's a pretty targeted ban against Chom there. But I also have a secret info that BlossoM has been practicing some weird, creative, crazy combos. So maybe they'll show it tonight or maybe later on. Who knows? They brought out something crazy against MVP Black and they won a game with Cho'Gall. So let's see how this draft goes. And Raven is taking some time on their first ban.
Yeah, it's perhaps a surprise Uther ban. Yesterday we saw, I mean, very little bans of that nature. It was kind of locked into Ariel, Genji nonstop. The thing about, do we give them the Genji or do we give them the Ariel? You have to make that choice, and it's not an easy one.
Yes, of course, Genji is a pretty good hyper carry if Tutu has his hands on it.
They will ban the Garrosh, so with this ban, they will choose whichever BlossoM does not take. And I don't think this Garrosh ban is indicative that they think he's S tier. It's just kind of a throwaway ban.
Yep.
You don't want to deal with it. You probably don't want to draft it yourself, but you're saying, okay, you can't take, you can't take the better one of the Genji Ariel. Give them the choice, but then you get to take it and pair it with something better. So
but the thing is, Chom barely ever plays Ariel though, and on the sheet, I don't see Ariel on the sheet at all. So.
In fact, they're not going to take it. Nope. Going to dominate the range damage aspect. It's the only map in Korean HGC where we see Li Ming picked in first rotation. He'll be with the Greymane, who's steadily rising to #1 in terms of picks, with Stitches dropping off of the meta. He was up at the top. So BlossoM now, they have Ariel available, but they've already gone down the Genji route, so I don't think you really want to put Dudu on the Vala with this draft unless you have a better rounded way of doing it. This is also not a very strong Rhaegar draft specifically because they don't have that tanky frontliner. They have Genji, who's not going to get as much value out of the Ancestral. Because his health pool is so low, it's tough to save him with Ancestral. That's why you see so many failed Ancestrals on the Genji.
It will be a big question because they banned Uther. They do have Rhaegar available, and if Mora or Wiz, if they go on with the, I think this is an Illidan route because they took at Arthur's because it may be banned later or taken later on. So they took the support that goes along with the dive, and they took Arthur's along with them. So I think they're going towards that Illidan with the last pick to perfect their comp.
I think for Raven, the Illidan ban, if they can realize what's happening, which is it's a tough ask. I mean, you are coming to the same conclusion I am. This feels like an Illidan draft, heavy dive into the backline to punish the Li Ming. because the DPS players on Raven are just simply not as talented as the dive we could see from BlossoM due to on the Genji. You can really do a lot to Li-Ming, especially if you use your deflection correctly.
That's right.
So you can dive and kill the Li-Ming, especially if you have an Illidan. If Raven could figure this out, I think it would be the smartest ban. Also remember that BlossoM will very likely ban Tyrael here, so Raven is also taking this time to think about what their response to that potential ban will be. And the Tastar ban could be going down a similar line of thinking, but I still think the Illidan ban would have been safer.
I think Illidan ban could have been a target, but if they missed the target, if BlossoM had a plan B. So I think that's what they were a little bit worried about. And Rehgar, oftentimes it needs a secondary support, and oftentimes it is Tastar that was open. Raven barely uses Tastar, so I think that was an okay ban. But BlossoM actually bans all the supports, and targeting Chom super hard.
Yeah, Chom has a really good Malfurion too. And this eliminates the possibility of Malfurion Stitches as well, which is still viable with the poke composition that Raven has. Basically, they don't dive with this, they poke, and then the only way to get a pick is to get that hook where you basically force them to be dove upon you, and you get the kill in a similar fashion, that burst damage that comes out for go for the throat. So I think that the Malfurion ban kind of twofold goes well with this. They could still pick up the Tyrael now, though, because it's available. And he will pair well with the Kharazim, especially if we get to 16 with the Holy Ground. But let's see. A lot of consideration now on the side of Raven. If they just want to play safe, I suppose we could just see the Muradin here.
And once they get the kill, Varian to lock in for the taunt when Genji or something else dives in later on in the draft. I think that's a solid option, but they really, especially Varian player, has to be careful. Before 10, you get blown up, and there are lots of CCs and burst damage on the other side. Well, I think their line of thinking is alright with providing more CC, just targeting lockup there. And also, once they get the kill, Li-Ming can do a lot of resets and turn things around. So I like this strat from Raven so far, actually.
It's very much countering the Illidan, the Varian pick. Sorry, the Genji, and potentially the Illidan. There is another trade-off we didn't talk about with the potential Illidan pick. It means that you're not going to have a quote-unquote standard solo tank. Arthas is not that. He has been played as that, but he does leave a lot to be desired in terms of mobility. For example, if they end up losing a fight against Li-Ming when she's getting resets, they don't really have a get-out-of-jail-free card with this draft currently.
And also, as you mentioned yesterday, if Rehgar has to Ancestral the front line, the tanks, then Genji or Illidan, the ones diving in doing the damage, will be very weak. So they will also bring in Vala for the extra damage. And I guess there will be a little bit of change because Dudu is known to play Vala and also Genji. So
yeah,
one of the other players from BlossoM will be taking one of those heroes.
Could be Modern Life himself as a possibility. I don't know if we've ever seen him on the Genji, actually. That is a good question. Just looking through real quick. Nope, he's never played it in Genji's release window, so could be potentially his first Genji lifetime game in professional play. For Raven now, they're looking for potentially a secondary tank here. It could be something a little bit more aggressive as well now that it is the 2 DPS on the side of BlossoM. They're not wholly going for the dive. There's a lot more dive on the side of BlossoM. They have more CC with the roots coming out from Arthas and Nubrock, etc. But it's not as all-in as we might have thought with potentially the Illidan coming out. Now, for Raven, what's it going to be here?
I still think Tyrael fits in alright with this comp.
I think so too. They're going to go Leoric. A very odd choice, you have to think. So I'm guessing this is going to be Wiz on the Leoric to try to get locked down onto potentially the Rehgar or the Vala to get the burst damage done with Li-Ming and Greymane. So it's a pick-based comp post-10. Pre-10, they are going to have problems with this composition, though. It's going to have to win out with poke, which is going to be very difficult against hyper-mobility that we have with both the Vala and the Genji. And Cupid build from Vala will make the race very difficult. We're going to go into game number 1, guys, on Battlefield of Eternity. It is BlossoM versus Raven, and their opening matches here for the HGC Korea Phase 2, Part number 2. We're in Week 6. Let's get into game number 1. In blue, BlossoM has Wiz on Arthas, Gondar on a new wreck. It is going to be Mora on Vala, Dudu on Genji, and No Chat on the Rhaegar.
And in red, Raven, Darvish on Greymane, Hamlin on Leoric, NMX on Liming, Diong on Darien, and Chom on Karazim.
So Mora has played 16 different heroes in Phase 2. He has one of the highest hero pools, you could argue, if you want to call that a hero pool, than anybody. He's the all-rounder, as we're going to see this crazy good control by Gondar of this fight. Beetle's going to help chase everybody away. But this will be his 17th now with the Vala. It will be his first career game on Vala. We'll see how well he performs here, but this is his new role for BlossoM, right? He's supposed to be the guy who can play anything, and so far he's shown that he can to a reasonable degree.
Yep, and he's really a flex into the team now that he's played so many heroes. Kind of like No Chat in Season 1, which No Chat was filling in lots of different heroes, from tanks to DPS to Falstad to the rotational work to even Dehaka sometimes. So they had made the substitution, they have made the changes into the role. Is it going to work? Which oftentimes in the other games that we see, if there are lots of those changes, oftentimes that player becomes the weak link of the team.
Yeah.
Plus, can Raven actually find that hole and try to punish that for it? I think it's possible, but let's see a little bit more, because Raven still needs a lot of time before 10.
Look at this performance we've already just seen from him right now, though. Very aggressive 1v3 there, poking, getting the most value out of his opponents there, knowing there's no lockdown, no CC, with the exception of Varian, and he doesn't have taunt just yet. Oh, look at this. Great execution to pick off the Liming. That's the kind of dive-esque that this comp can show. It's not full dive, but it certainly has its moments where it could use the CC, chain the stuns together, and get the pickoffs like that on squishy heroes like Liming when they're out of position for just a moment. The comp for Raven will struggle to dive, though, and so actually taking control of this Immortal will be difficult, especially with Liming now on the run back from the Hell of Storms, still respawning. The Leoric is going to stay in the top lane to try to gain an experience lead, as Wiz is going to make calls from up there.
That got called with a lot of CC. There's the first one, and Genji will get resets and after resets. And it's starting already.
I mean, I suppose the wave that it will now scratch its claws against the top towers is a small consolation prize. They forced 7 minions to be missed for BlossoM as well in terms of experience, but the kills will make up for it. And this was just a misunderstanding of a rotation. Lyric didn't come down, Liming was not there, their comp cannot dive, and they fought essentially 3v5 in that moment. They will now face a 2/3 shielded Immortal. And Raven, again, is just going to have to sit back. They at least have the consolation again of the poke that their comp has, the siege that Greymane and Liming can provide on the defense against the Immortal. Well, those are things you don't really want to be thinking about this early into the game.
And already I see a lot of good rotational work from BlossoM. Of course, this is the 2-lane map, and it's easier to say, but even with that Immortal, Genji has been going down. They're not putting too much pressure onto this top because they do not have too much poke, actually. It is Q-Vala, but it's racing for the Immortal. Not too much poking yet until Mora gets that full stack to finish her quest.
DeYoung's going in here for the charge, but he is going to find himself stunned as a result. Good parry usage, but still, Dudu wants to go in. They want to actually dive deep for this. And this is going to force Raven to retreat. Good retreat, good positioning here by Raven. But they will end up losing this fort at the end of the day because the threat was too great to position themselves aggressively to stop.
All the way into the fort,
yeah.
And they didn't even commit all 5. That's a big win, I gotta say. A little bit due to having Karazim on the team, not providing too much of sustained healing, and they were going in 1 by 1, just taking aggro, taking their own health off, while the Immortal was pushing so hard. They do have poke, but still they need some more power spike to actually poke a little bit stronger. Yeah,
DeYoung went in very aggressively too, and it looked like the team wasn't ready to join him. And sure, the charge in is a great slow and a great way to initiate the fight because you have parry. You're essentially invulnerable with your protect available. So DeYoung's idea there is not incorrect, but it was the coordination, the lack of follow-up damage on the side of Raven. Where were the orbs going over the wall to make that move necessary, to make that move really worth it? They just weren't there.
Even this one, is Hamlin staying here? Is it worth it? Or is he just going to die? He didn't
He
die,
dies.
but he will die. Was it going to take the camp? No, there was no way. NMX was coming, but it was 2v1 on himself on the camp, and NMX had a long time to chase
Oh boy, Darvish is going to get picked here as well. In lane, it looks like very high chance.
No
check
fort,
gets the poke. And yeah, there's no fort, as you say. Darvish is going to try to die fast, or at least to respawn as quick as possible. You know, the other thing about that, too, is you could hold that thought we're going to see a double pick here as a great rotation up for BlossoM. They are just running a clinic as to how to move around the map. But the thing we saw from Hamlin there, you know, was it worth it? The answer was definitely no. I guess you could make the argument that he was trying to do a Noble-esque move where he looks like he's staying so hard that you're like, oh my god, they must be rotating, but they had vision.
He's
not, first of all, he's not Noble-esque.
First of all, he's
Second
not
of
Noble-esque.
all, they had vision. And third of all, it's Leoric, who definitely could have escaped a little bit faster there. And because he was not, BlossoM was like, what in the world? I guess we get this kill and
Leoric pick, I think it's more of a just pushing lane and soaking EXP a little bit more from what we've been seeing so far. After 10, maybe initiating the fight, but before that, I would just say go to the lane, try to have some evade the team fight if you can, and try to soak for 10, and then start your own when you have the chance.
Yeah, well, he is doing a little bit of extra damage up here in the front line. Gets a good slow, but the positioning for BlossoM is better, and we're just seeing so much damage done by Mora on the Immortal with Q alone. They end up being slightly behind, but they actually have a pretty decent health lead for the next follow-up team fight. Raven is going to try to dive and defend here. Greymane is racing meanwhile. Good parries again from Diong, actually. There's the second one. He's not able to find anything else, but still they regain control of this. Greymane actually will help them win this Immortal War if something doesn't happen very soon for BlossoM.
Nicely done by Diong, protecting and soaking in so much damage, but once Dudu start finding those kills, he will get those resets. Of course, Greymane will actually finish off the Immortal on top, but they will lose basically more than half of their team. And of course, they got the Immortal, but
this is going to be a kill, it should be, by the way, onto Darvish.
Darvish is way too late. He's going around, but Gondar already on top of things. Body block will be real here.
Yeah, there's no fort, as you said from earlier. So that first Immortal, he's even going to commit the cocoon.
There's a cocoon, and strafe again.
Hamlin is coming over here, but I couldn't tell you why, to be honest. He's definitely risking his own life as well in this situation. Yeah, there's the kill with the dash reset for Dudu. So they got the Immortal, but they're already in position. It's very lucky for Raven as well, or sorry, for BlossoM as well, because while they are on their way to get the gank, it puts them in good position to already deal with this Immortal that wasn't very heavily shielded. Raven gets an objective, which will help them soak to 10 now. They're actually doing again what they did last time, is just pushing the other lane so they can get this structural damage to lead into that experience lead. Hamlin's up here trying to get as much experience as he can. Very risky, though, considering the wave is pushed. So they're struggling to get 10, but they're almost there. As we actually see human range coming out from Darvish, by the way, an odd Wolfheart build into the human range at 7. No cocktails and not Wizened Duelist, so just looking for additional poke and siege. When you're fighting a losing battle, it's a weird talent pick in general, but when you're fighting a losing battle like this one, I guess I could see why you'd do it defensively for the siege.
Like the rotational move coming out from Raven, they sent, of course, Immortal went top, so they went to the bottom, but the reaction from BlossoM, they knew that they were missing from the lane, top lane, and there are only a few things you can do. Of course, go to the bot lane. If you started the camp before the Immortal, which that didn't happen because they were all together in the middle, and they lost a lot of members especially, and so the only way was to go to bot, and BlossoM counteracted pretty well. They defended their fort, and I think their gate is still there too. Yeah. So BlossoM, they soaked in a lot of the EXP, but they couldn't really get what they were planning for, and BlossoM is just on top of everything that Raven is trying to do right now.
Just abusing the fact that, like, in this situation, the reason why Hamlin was there at all was because the wave was so pushed in the top lane because of the Immortal, so he couldn't really soak. He was trying to, and that's when BlossoM was making these heavy rotations knowing both forts are down. And they're losing out in experience making these moves, BlossoM is, but it's worth it because they're so far ahead that it won't be significant. Here comes the next fight now, as we see Seven Side is used here as an escape tool for Chom. Dudu's got the Dragon Blade. Doesn't get the kill just yet, but one more swipe will do it.
And then he also escapes with the shift. And Entomb onto Arthas.
I don't think that was the plan.
I don't think that was the plan. I think Vala was nearby. Maybe he was aiming for Vala, and Mora just escaped barely. And it's actually a good chance if you have Taunt and Entomb.
Yeah.
If you can get Vala, who doesn't have Rain, he actually chose Strafe. So without the extra CCs available, if you can burst down along with Greymane, a 7-sided, I think it's a very good possibility that after that, if you start getting kills, Li Ming will have the crazy power spike. I think it can work alright, especially with Strafe on the other side.
I mean, I also think this is what the comp was designed to do when they picked Leoric and Varian. It was never going to be strong in the early game. It was going to be strong post-10, as we were talking about. And here's the Entomb on Duvall that they were looking for. There's the Strafe. There isn't enough to finish him off. The Cocoon here is brilliant.
That's nice. The Cocoon onto Leoric. That's nicely done. Entomb, after 7-sided, barely dashes out. Darvish goes in for the kill, but there's no focusing. And there's Ancestral Healing.
Didn't even need it.
I don't think it was needed. It was somewhat needed to heal back, of course, but Mora was not going to die at all.
No. Full shields, by the way. A perfect Immortal here. 13 kills to 0. The fort's all standing. We could have a perfect game on our hands here if BlossoM can win the game with this push without losing a member. As Raven is... They had Darvish picked there, unfortunately, and they just... This comp, they're trying to get these grabs, they're trying to get these picks, but the coordination is better on the side of BlossoM. If you want to pick a draft that requires such meticulous coordination, such good shot calling, and very strong target selection, and being able to make those calls on the fly, you better be able to make those calls when those moments happen. If you get the perfect Entomb on Vala and still can't kill her, you have to wonder, why are they running the comp at all? And now 14 to 11, the 3-level lead. The Immortal with full shields is going to have so many ranged attacks. Raven has human range on Darvish, and they have a lot of poke with Li Ming, but still, I don't think this keep is standing. If any picks come on the side of BlossoM, it might just be game over.
And 3 1/3 level lead, and even Leoric barely escapes. There's a strafe. Entomb catches Gondar, but for what also has the Cocoon available, so he's just choosing targets at this moment. Chom will go down for sure after that. Another swing on the Dragon Blade. Protect comes in, but they will just be standing for a few more seconds. Actually, BlossoM's diving super hard.
They actually end up losing Arthas, so goodbye perfect game. In fact, it will be the double resets coming in here for NMX. And it looks like they will save the core for the time being. It's going to be close.
A little too excited there, but they can. I think they can do it. It's 3v3, and they do have Ancestral Healing. Yeah. So I think it's enough.
Yeah, the Ancestral is going to put it over the top here as Dudu cannot be killed. That is going to be game. Not the perfect game there in terms of not losing a single member. They lost 2 in that final fight, but really good play on the Arthas, actually. We saw a lot of Howling Blast connecting there, and beyond it all, Gondar got to play his comfort pick on the Anubarak. We'll see if that becomes an Achilles heel for the new up-and-coming player for HGC as the series goes longer, because a hero that's not as meta now as he was once before. Every time I see Diong smiling, I feel like he's hurting inside.
Yes,
oh, man.
He is hurting inside.
Diong is always the only one smiling when Raven loses, every time, without fail.
Because the camera is on, he's in the middle of the team. He has to smile. He can't be just falling down on the desk, you know. And he
can't be doing a crazy moving, no.
He can't be doing the crazy moving like, oh, why? Why does this happen to my team? That's crazy moving, but not Diong. He's a happy guy, and from game 1, I think it's in the beginning, and I'm afraid that we actually saw the ending of the series too.
Yeah, I worry. Now let's not call this series over, but we have to. You know, we're not going to lie to you guys. Ravens on a massive, massive, massive losing streak. Could be, in fact, hold the phone.
Hold the phone. Okay.
They have the worst record in HGC history. I just checked. I was pretty sure there wasn't a worse record, but I have the stats, and I just checked, and that's actually the case. So it's rough. They made it through the Crucible. That was their biggest accomplishment, which is very important.
And it was a stomp, and they won, I believe, 4-0 against RRR, and that was a big stomp back in Crucible. And that's a long time ago, though, and that's not HGC. That was open division level. So.
Yeah. It's like a fly landing on my head while we're casting.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
get
a giant
out of here!
one, too.
It's like huge. Okay. I don't
Save
know where he
us,
went.
guys!
He keeps trying to land on my coffee, and I'm like, get out of here. Okay. I don't know how he got in here. Did you watch Breaking Bad?
No.
Okay. There's an episode called Fly. It's very good. I recommend it.
I saw the Breaking Bad from Mirage, but that's the only one. But game 1, we've seen. Okay, we see the idea. We've explained the idea why they try to make this kind of team call, what they were trying to do, but you have the idea, but coordination, it takes time. It takes lots of practice. I don't think it's going to come in one game. Maybe they will have a miraculous game with super coordination if with all the comfort picks, which I don't think they will have this time, especially when you see all these support chokes coming in from BlossoM from game number 1. I think they made a very smart approach to spanning out Chun, which a lot of the stronger teams also did against Raven. I think it's going to continue over game number 2 and all the way into the late series.
Well, let's see where we're headed for game 2. It's going to be Cursed Hollow. This will be actually